So we're now going to move on to a panel discussion, and it's looking at how companies define themselves and who finds value in you based on your identity. So with that, it's my pleasure to hand over to Aline Charpentier, Head of Innovation from Bruntwood SciTech, and her panellists to take us through this engaging topic, and just also to highlight that our panel session is being sponsored by Bruntwood SciTech as well. Thank you, and over to Aline and her panel. Thank you. Yes. Oh, there is one set up there. You can stand here.
Am I standing here or am I staying? I stand here. Yeah, I get the standing position. All right. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for staying with us. Thank you for the introduction, Alicia. As the panel sits down, just a quick introduction. So my name is Aline Charpentier. I'm going to chair that session in the next 40 minutes. I'm the Head of Innovation for Bruntwood SciTech. For those who don't know, Bruntwood SciTech develops, operates science parks and innovation districts across the country. More precisely, what we mean is Manchester, Leeds, Birmingham, Cambridge, the Melbourne Science Park, which is where I'm based. And as per very recently announced, we're looking at redeveloping the White City campus with Imperial. So what that means is we have a lot of technology or biology-based companies on our side, and the job of the people like me, the Head of Innovation, is to look at supporting these companies, so help them to, form, grow, thrive, etc. And it was hard enough to look after the whole, helping raising money, helping recruiting talent, shaping your value proposition in a world where you were a bit of a biology or a technology company. But now with the plethora and explosion of a new terminology like Biotech, TechBio, deep Biotech, Agri-Tech, HealthTech, can name many others, but we'll go to that in the panel. It just sends a bit of lack of feeling your identity, and it's becoming sometimes a problem. So I think that's what this panel will look at exploring. So before we go into the introduction, I just wanted to keep you a bit awake and get a quick show of hands. So in this audience, who would say they would fit into biology solely? Who is a biology person? That's it. That's very little for a life science audience. Who is just a technology person? Even less. Who is biology and technology? Thank you. That's more. Who is none? Oh, no, you're not none. Okay, so that gives a bit of a sense. We're already sitting in the middle. So, lovely panel. Can I ask you to introduce yourself briefly, organization you represent, and maybe to tell us where you think you fit in that biology technology fence, if that's a fence. Alicia, you want to start?
Sure. I'm Alicia Showering. I'm the CEO and co-founder of BugBiome. And what we do is we discover bioinsecticides. So we're fighting pests and protecting crops from those pests. So the first word that comes to mind for me is Ag-Tech. But some people are a little scared of Ag-Tech. So branching out into other things as well, I think being a kind of multidisciplinary TechBio, Biotech seem to fit us as well. Anything.
So right in the middle between tech and... Okay, thank you. Abigail.
I'm Abigail Martin. I'm the CEO and co-founder of a company called ImmuONE. We bring in vitro solutions that are highly tailored for our clients for a range of different industries. I would say that ImmuONE sits in the biotech realm, although we do play a lot with data. So I'm sort of starting to move on the fence, actually, where we might sit, possibly for the future, but for now I will say we're biotech.
Thank you. Belinda.
Hello, my name's Belinda Clarke. I run Agri-TechE, which, if you understand what one nucleus does, we do that, but with an agri-tech flavour. And increasingly we're starting to look at this space between pharma with an F and pharma with a PH, because there's a potential for crops to be used, or plants under highly controlled conditions, to produce interesting compounds such as either pharmaceuticals themselves or precursors for pharmaceuticals. So while I will die on the hill of agri-tech, and we can get into whether it's agri-tech, ag-tech, or, I mean, we've spent 10 years wrestling with this one, I think we're probably squarely agri-tech, but if asked, I will describe myself as a biologist. So even though we talk about satellite technology and robotics, so I've just got a massive identity crisis, basically.
Good. Welcome to the session. Kat.
Hi, I'm Kat Stace. So I'm business development for an emerging company called Kuano. We are a drug discovery company, but we sit in the TechBio space, and I'll explain why in a moment. So we have a novel platform for structure-based drug design, but based on understanding the world through quantum theory. So most structure-based drug design and simulations and molecular dynamics at the moment are viewing the world through Newtonian physics. The geniuses behind Kuano, I'm not one of them, actually worked out a way in which you can use quantum theory on conventional supercomputers, so you don't need a quantum computer. So we have both that technology platform, which has implications for sort of more run-of-the-mill drug discovery, but it can also solve some specific technical problems with drug discovery, such as covalent ligand prediction. But we also have our own internal pipeline of therapeutic assets that we're developing. So in many ways, we are your typical therapeutics biotech. But actually where we fit is more in this the classic tech bio space that's been shaped out now, where we're a combination of biotech that uses deep tech to facilitate that for drug discovery. I think there is a disconnect sometimes between the identity you have in terms of your application, which, as I say, very much for Kuano is the tech bio space. Our identity that we have in terms of who we are and our culture, it's still very much about the technology and the physics.
Thanks, Kat. And we go back to our point of identity. So I guess when we sort of question where do you fit, and who does it matter to, it really comes down to why do you need to fit somewhere in the first place? So I think we're just going to try to dig a little bit into that, and we have a few key elements that we felt were important. So the first one is around that question of nomenclature itself. Is it accurate? Is it the right one? Sort of terminology between sectors and technology. And Belinda, if you'd like to start on that topic, how important is it?
So for me, because we're unlike some of my contemporaries on the panel, we've not been seeking investment from investors. And I think there's others better qualified than I to talk about the perception from investors. Agri-Tech in the UK started in 2013 with a national strategy that the government published. And Agri-Tech wasn't really a thing back then. And the government put a lot of energy into this strategy. And in order to understand the impact of that, it needed to have a shape and boundaries that it could get its arms around to see whether this strategy had been impactful. And so this sector of Agri-Tech was created. And it's been to my continual chagrin about that, because to me, it's not the agri-tech sector. The sector is agriculture and horticulture. And agri-tech is a selection of enabling technologies from all sorts of technologies, mining, material science, whatever it could be, from different sectors that come in to bring support to agriculture, which was traditionally built on chemistry, machinery, and genetics. We're now getting all these other things in. And by having that kind of quite narrowly defined definition, we kind of are not including, Microsoft would never describe itself as an ag tech company, but it's got a head of agriculture, and they're doing an awful lot in technology. So I think it's mainly been for us around government being able to measure. But as that sort of trajectory has been set across the world, and it's not just the UK that's been leading that, that's where it's sort of been defined by the sector it serves, which for me, I think, does it a disservice.
Okay, so not a good point. Alicia, do you have any comment on the agri-tech point? If you
think,
define yourself as one.
Yeah, I think on the kind of investment point, when in the UK at least, when I say we do agri-tech, I think we get a lot of questions around kind of business models that are typically associated with agri-tech being very long routes to market, and that kind of usually brings me on to arguing that we're something other than just agri-tech, just based on the fact we do discovery. So I'd say we have more of a TechBio kind of model there, and we think that in the next 2 to 3 years, deals with money are going to be on the table for us, and we don't agree that that's a 10-year route to market. So yeah, I think then kind of I think it's the same with investors, with a different kind of terminology that gets bashed around. We can be climate tech if that's what people want us to be.
So do you think there's a misunderstanding between technology themselves and the markets, the applications? That's what I'm hearing.
Yeah, and I think that with investors, I think that those kind of, they get thrown around those kind of different terms. Whereas we had a lot of chat in the pre-call kind of, I asked my team yesterday, what are we? And everyone said Ag-Tech, which was relieved to hear. But also when we speak to farmers, obviously we're Ag-Tech. So I think there's less kind of...
Okay. Yeah, less clear for them. Kat?
Yeah, so with regards to, why do we need to give people a label or fit in a box? Again, and when we say, where do you fit? I mean, fitting innately implies something on the outside. Where do you fit with something on the outside or something external? And I think at Kuano and also the other companies that I've worked for the last 20 years or so, there are two reasons why it is sometimes helpful to coin a phrase about what you are and what you're about. And the first is with the external environment in mind, so investors and customers, which nobody likes a beast they don't recognize. So people like what's familiar. So being able to show people something they may recognize in terms that they recognize is very valuable in terms of resonating with your customers and investors. The other reason why sometimes this labeling is helpful is to help culturally, internally with that sense of identity. And that is absolutely critical. And I've experienced this not just in experience, but also in theory in a study I did in my MBA, where it became very apparent that being able to unify, particularly a multidisciplinary team, to have that one sense of identity, that one sense of vision, is actually underpins so much about the success of that company. And in some ways, having these labels and these boxes can help with that, just so long as it doesn't exclude those that fall between the boxes.
Okay, but also as long as you agree with the boxes.
Yeah,
from what
absolutely.
I've heard is not necessarily the case.
And sometimes, there is an element of changing a cultural mindset. If internally the self-identity of those that are working for that organisation says, no, we're physicists, or no, we're software, and actually what you're applying it to is therapeutics or bioprocessing, then it does become something about the mindset. And quite often it's very easy to say in theory, actually everyone needs to unify and get behind the same vision, but it is ultimately a behavioural change and an attitude change thing, and that's much harder to actually implement in practice.
Okay. Abigail, do you either have comment on the topic of nomenclature?
A little bit, yes.
Go.
Yeah, I would say definitely. I think investors probably have certain portfolios that they're looking to find groups of companies in, and maybe that's why it's really important to make sure that you've done your research on the investors that you're approaching and how you're pitching your business to. I closed a seed round last year. For my company with two VCs and a US angel. So you can imagine, it was really important to put that story right. Our customers, I don't think actually really care what we are, if I think about it. I was thinking this morning, just what have we been referred to, maybe when we've been introduced to somebody else. And actually it's often just been a company, like an in vitro solutions company. Which I thought was actually quite interesting. The only thing is maybe the team as well. So that was really cool that you actually asked your team. I'm going to do that tomorrow.
there's no surprises.
Yeah, it might be, yeah. But then I was thinking about, because we're in a growth phase right now and we're growing our team and actually we're looking for some really diverse skills, and actually maybe, how we pitch the company or how we go out and look for these skill sets might actually mean that we need to go and look at, we need to go to a sort of more of a deep tech field to explore those skills and find them and bring them in-house.
Okay, so you touch on a lot of topic. One question before we move on to the who, that was around whether these boxes make you made you and are still making you shifting your business model thinking, so just the shaping of that, because that's the topic that we were addressing. Obviously, if you're full on biotech on asset development, it's very different than being a platform technology or being an enabling technology. So do you think, and sorry I'm looking at you Abigail, because that was more obvious to you in the first place, do you think the boxes made you shift that, or not so much? The boxes are just cosmetic? because they are what you want them to be. I
Yeah.
think. Okay, so how do you want them to be then?
Yeah, I mean, it's your, so if it's your business, you're driving this forward. You see the vision for the future, you know. So you're living in it now. What does it look like? But what does it look like, you know, down the line? Again, if you're going to be looking for multiple rounds of investment, which has come up, you know, today, are you going to be pitching to the same investors, or are you going to be looking for very different ones? You know, that, you know, we've also heard that, you know, you need to start, you know, engaging with your investors well in advance of when you need them. So again, you know, if you're going to start moving into, you know, generating more data, or, you know, more of a dare I say, data tech, or, you know, sort of a TechBio, then, you know, do you want to start creating that box for your company for its business plan for the future?
Thank you. So the cosmetic obviously comes up.
Yeah.
Thank you. So we touched a bit about the who, and I think there's a diversity of answers on, do you really need to fit somewhere depending on the who you speak to? So maybe if I come back a bit to this employee question, so it's great, they all align with what you want to do. But on the recruitment piece, that's interesting what you're saying, because do you think you get people more from the sector you're in, so the applications, or more from the technology you're developing, and you get more open-mindedness to that? Who doesn't want to kickstart on this? Kat?
Yeah, I think absolutely. I think, you know, employees are a type of customer, and, you know, exactly as my co-panelist said, you know, actually how you pitch to them is really important. You know, there are those out there that, you know, don't mind what you call yourself, and they're quite happy to think outside the box. But generally speaking, it's just human nature. When you're searching for something, you search on particular search terms. So I think how you pitch and present it is important. And I think whether we're talking about investment or recruitment or internal culture, or business models, there's a difference between a nomenclature and a box. So nomenclature's fine. It helps you make sense of things and understands things, and can help you frame a conversation around which sort of business model should we go for. And it just gives you literally the words to actually have that conversation. When we're talking about boxes, it's a bit different, because boxes, you know, innately say there are boundaries and there are limits. And I think things do and maybe should fit into the categories, but at the same time, we should always be thinking outside the box. And I think, so when we're pitching to, I mean, I could talk about the investment side, but when we're talking about the recruitment and employee side, encouraging those to think outside the box, what they consider would be a typical role in this field, and to say, actually, there's similar roles, but in a different field that you would be really, really good at, I think is a good way to pitch it.
How's it to recruit in Agri-Tech then, Belinda?
There's been very interesting shift in Agri-Tech, in that increasingly there are people who don't have a background in the industry are bringing their incredibly helpful skills to the sector. There was a big conference yesterday hosted by an agronomy company, and we had to stand there, and there was a guy who said, I'm a software engineer. I really am so passionate about food and climate change, and I want to bring my skills. Would anybody want me? Well, yeah, absolutely. You know, the farms of the future are now already starting to recruit data scientists as part of the farming team. So that sort of analysis of data, it doesn't matter, data is data, it doesn't matter what your background is, being able to mine, use AI, all that kind of stuff. And the narrative sells itself. I think people often want to feel that they're applying their skills in a sector or to an application that really matters to them. Either it is, you know, helping to cure patients, or it is helping to save the planet or feed people. So I think, again, that's where the application angle is really important, because we need to make our different sectors appealing to people who have very left field skills from the traditional ones that we've been talking about for the last 20 years. And we need to make them welcome. And this is a sector that you do not need a background in order to bring those skills in. So don't ask for a software engineer. Ask for someone who understands data, who can work on a farm and help with food production.
But putting the tech at the back, make it sound more sexy for them, maybe. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Alicia, recruiting in Agri-Tech.
Yeah, I think recruiting in Agri-Tech is kind of, for us, we've definitely made kind of changes recently in our job descriptions. We've kind of accepted that we like people across disciplines. and tried to reword things in a way to encourage. Well, for example, we're trying to hire an entomologist, which is an insect person. It's a very niche job, and we kind of needed somebody on the development field trial side of things. And we've had engineers apply to that role who were engineers by training, but have PhDs in field trials. And that was absolutely not what crossed my mind when I wrote that job description, but I think could be a very good fit. So I think some things on that cross-disciplinary, not necessarily just in ag tech, but I'm from a farming adjacent background, but definitely not ag tech background.
It's a lovely thing that's happening at the moment, and this is something that I've felt passionately about for years, but we are finally beginning to see this sort of natural appetite for blending different disciplines together, fusing things together. Once upon a time they were separate cuisines, and now we've got fusion. And I think that's a really healthy thing, and it does mean that names and nomenclature may stay and they have a place, but we can actually think outside the box and work with things that are neither in one box nor the other, and that people are more open about that now than they were. I mean, there are still some areas where the box does constrain things. I think we tend to think that those in that box will adopt that business model, those in that box will adopt that business model, and if the two things cross over, everyone gets very nervous. But I think certainly in terms of recruitment and awareness that there are other things going on, I think that's been really helpful. I was talking to somebody earlier out in the hall about sort of the open publication movement, and it's much easier now for scientists to find information in journals that aren't in their chosen discipline. It's just little things like that I think are really helping open the minds of job applicants and also those that are founding companies and investing in companies.
It's interesting because what I'm hearing is the more boxes we're creating, the more fluidity it's creating amongst them. So, yeah, okay.
It doesn't matter to have different branches and different categories as long as you're able to have the crosstalk between them and you're not segregating things.
Okay. Does the recruitment play in the balance of picking your boxes, Abigail, or not really?
Yeah, it does. I mean, I think we've kind of done very much what you've done, and put information out there and said this is kind of what we're looking for. And I find it can be quite. I don't think we've been as lucky to have such cross field people apply, but I would like to see more of that. I do know there was at one point I was hiring a sort of essentially a bit of data work, and I met a guy, and he was like, I can take a computer apart and put it back together again within half a day. And I was like, this is really cool. And you know what? He was amazing, and he hadn't done a single spreadsheet in his life until he'd come and work for us. And I just thought, like, that was so amazing, and actually he brought so much value to the team, and in the end he was like a go-to guy for a huge number of things. But yes, I suppose just being open minded as well about those things. I don't think he would have ever applied for a biotech job if I had said I work for the biotech company.
Okay, so all positive stories on that fluidity between different boxes when you're very interdisciplinary. No?
Yeah, it can be. Going back to it's all very well until the definition of things get too narrow.
Yeah.
That's what we have to watch out for. So to a certain extent, I'm advocating, categorizing things because it's just helpful in terms of framing conversations. But when things get too narrow or too rigid or inflexible, that's when there becomes an issue.
Yeah.
And also there is almost an apology. It's kind of, well, I work in a biotech, but I'm not a biologist. And I hear this all the time, well, I work in ag tech, but I'm not a farmer. And it's almost this need to kind of apologise that you haven't got, since you were knee-high to a grasshopper, this deep, deep sector knowledge. And actually, I've always said, I can teach people about the sector. That takes a year. What I can't teach is the attitude, the mindset, the absorptive capacity to learn new stuff, to apply it, all that kind of thing. But the box can be unhelpful if people put themselves in one and feel the need to apologise for not having vast domain knowledge in the target sector.
Or if that box is limiting, we've talked offline, and it's probably a much bigger conversation about TechBio. Why is it just digital tech? There's plenty of other techs, and maybe if we did open up that term to include other types of technology, then we would see more cross-pollination between things like biotech and ag tech, because people wouldn't see that it always has to be this constrained. and spoken about in that way.
It's a good starting point. I think where I always wanted to lead is very positive on the people side and recruiting. Would you be happy to share a bit of your experience with maybe raising money, going out to investors with these labels? Are they useful? Not? And yeah, are you using them basically? Who wants to start? Alicia?
Okay.
I'm sorry, you're first.
I think I've really kind of said some of my points, kind of linking to business model, and if you put yourself in that box of ag tech, I think I've had some bad experience with that in the UK with investors, and I think some of that's around education of business model, and that doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to sell to farmers. That's not our intention. So I think it's again, whatever's sexy, isn't it? As well, we talked about this in the pre-call, and I wouldn't say Agri-Tech is very sexy in the UK and investors.
No, you're right. You're right.
To be honest, if you've got some contacts, Belinda, send them my way. But yeah.
So you need to be aware on the context of when you're using the boxes. So what you're saying is you wouldn't use AgTech to go and pitch for some investors who clearly would be interested in your company.
But we did also discuss about logo colours, and we do have a green logo, so we're not denying that we're agri.
Well, it's a mix between identity and purely cosmetic branding, but that's important to know. Did you have the same experience, Abigail?
I equally actually found it quite hard for us to fit within a box. And I kind of thought, we'd easily fit into, the biotech, but actually we kind of didn't. And then I also explored, I went to pitching events at MedTech, and they were like, absolutely not. Why are you here? Health tech, why are you here? This is, we're talking about clinical stuff. Like, we don't want any preclinical, discussions going on here. So I was, for a while, and throughout this sort of year and a half that I was pitching and developing a store, it was actually really hard to find that fit with investors. But again, that's kind of why I was saying it's really important to understand, who these investors are that are going to these events, and actually even the background of that specific person that's going, or that you're hoping to be able to reach, because maybe it's within that investment group, there might be someone else that will understand your pitch more, or it will just resonate with them, and they'll understand actually why you're at a medtech pitch event and you're trying to talk about how you can help companies bring drugs to market,
but just harder. Okay.
I think from Kuano's experience in fundraising, we haven't had so many problems with investors being fixated on what box you in, and I think that's because we are privileged in so much as Kuano's technology is very much in that TechBio space, that quintessential TechBio space, which is more recognised out there, and it is a sexy field. I think where we've had to be careful is where we are going for more of a tech investor that will be interested in the TechBio space as well, about how we pitch the business model, and vice versa. So if we're going to a biotech investor that's interested in sort of the therapeutics pipeline and partnering model, then we have to be a little bit careful if we're throwing a slightly different business model into the mix. So I think that's where the boxes are unhelpful, where boxes are associated with a certain way of doing things, and thou shalt not deviate from that, or if you do, it's perceived as too much of a risk. So again, it comes down to how you pitch things and how you present things. But we haven't had difficulty in getting interest and pitching. It's more about how we do it and how we talk about things. Actually, getting the money is still very challenging. But we're able to resonate with a variety of different investors, but we do have to tune to the audience how we present what we do, particularly our business model.
I suppose the benefit of when you are fluid between those boxes, you can throw a few carrots on there and see what they bite onto, and know which part excites that particular investor. And that doesn't mean you're changing your company. You can just talk more about the bit that they find exciting.
I think what's always important is to have that clarity about why are you here, who is it for? And particularly with these sorts of companies where you can take things in lots of different directions, being able to decide at least on a primary path, so that then you can talk clearly, you can articulate it well, you can be succinct. Because if you can do all of those things and you've got a clear direction that you're going in, even if there are plenty of other possibilities, to be able to say that you've got that direction gives people confidence. And I think the same, and this isn't just for investment, I think the same applies when you're appealing to potential employees as well. They don't want to know that they're working for a company that doesn't really know where they're going. They want to know, yeah, we've got this mapped out, guys, but actually there's lots of other things we can do, but we've got this primary path mapped out.
Okay.
Just on the nomenclature and investment. So up until pre-COVID, really, there were a lot of big funds targeting agri-tech and very noisily and visibly really going quite aggressively for agri-tech. There was the pandemic, there were all sorts of things, including a number of them caught a cold with investing in big capital expensive projects that didn't have the right business model and didn't work. So there's been a bit of a kind of rowing back, and two things have happened. So there was in 2022, the global investment into agri-food tech was $30 billion. And the UK was ranking 4th or 5th, around 5th in the global rankings. The following year, the total global investment had halved to $15 billion in agri-food tech. And a lot of that was in sort of post-farm gate, like e-delivery and things like that. But the UK ranked 2nd. Now, there's all sorts of reasons why that happened. And everybody started sort of gnashing their teeth that, oh my goodness, there's a big decline in investment in agri-food tech. But we've seen also an increase in investors that will now describe themselves as being interested in climate tech solutions or clean tech solutions, because as we've had the sort of the pandemic and the decline of things like vertical farming, there's been an increase in the appetite for climate tech solutions, because that's the thing that everybody's now excited about. So there's almost a bit of rebadging going on with those who are raising funds, which I think then filters down to those who are raising money, because Alicia, I could absolutely argue that your solution is a climate tech solution. So in a way, you almost need to follow the zeitgeist as to what the big funds want to align themselves with.
And that's interesting because there's, not sometimes, always a misalignment of timelines with
Absolutely.
that. And also you touch upon the trend and the fact that the good thing is driver traction, that's great, but that may fall out of fashion. I mean, you talk agri-tech, I didn't know, but clean tech was a big thing 10 years ago as well. And I think lots of investors got burnt with it. And so it went down and now has to rebound. So that's the risk maybe that you think you're taking if you are picking too narrow boxes. Yeah.
I think absolutely, these things come in fashions.
How you serve that as
yeah,
a company,
exactly. Whether you're writing a
boxes,
grant
really
or going for investment or just simply describing what your company is and does, you need to use the modern phrases that resonate with your modern audience. Okay. I think what is different now is that there are more terms around that do describe those kind of fusion and interdisciplinary spaces, which is great. It means that we have more room to maneuver, within what was previously distinct areas. And actually, we have more choice about how we can actually describe our company because we have all the more phrases to choose from. So yeah, you can pick the word that sings most to whoever you're going for. And I guess this boils down to, again, who is this for? And then you can work out how you fit with them.
Yeah. So it's good because that translates to more multidisciplinarity, but then maybe it's to revisit that sort of boxes that you fit into regularly.
And choose which box you think best describes what you do to that audience.
Any further comment before we come to a final question?
I think there's some differences in where the goalposts are between those different investors that we've touched on, like climate tech versus ag tech. And again, linking back to the business model, if you're a platform versus asset, very different expectations. They're just worth being aware of. And you get a good feel of that from chatting to investors.
Probably the profitability of your business as well. So like that route to market time frame as well can be very different depending on what box you're going to put yourself in. So you could suddenly have very high expectations if you've said on, I don't know, biotech versus another one where the route to market might be 10 years. So tread cautiously when you do that.
Yeah, but again, it's more you're picking the box related to your decision on business model, not the other way around. The box is
I think it's important to be consistent as well, because sometimes internally your kind of sense of self as a company, your kind of internal sense of identity can be one thing, but then what your application could actually be a slightly different identity. And we're seeing that a lot at the moment, particularly with the tech and the merging with the bio, that you could have this kind of tech core, but actually it might be a bio application. And so then, all this lovely stuff about you can pick and choose which box you want to say in order to appeal to what audience. You've got different audiences then. You've got your internal audience and you've got your external audience. And it's a bit like your sense of identity as a person as well. It's like, I identify as a scientist, but my application now is business, As long as you can actually square that circle and understand why it makes sense, then I think that's okay. But if you've got two different boxes for two different purposes, that somehow they do need to be congruent somehow.
Okay, thank you. So as we're coming close to an end, and I've been told we need to stick to that very tight schedule, my take on that is it's kind of positive to put boxes, because that enables more thinking about multidisciplinarity, more fluidity. The core thing is not rocket science. It's think about where you want to go, what company you want to build, and the business model, and then you attach the labels that you think will fit best and will bring in a bit more of multidisciplinarity. I thought we could conclude the panel with a more open question, and you don't have to answer if you don't have one, but since we're coming with new words apparently every year, just wondered if you had any idea of what could be the big next trend after TechBio and TechBio and all of that. Kath, do you have a name?
Yeah,
either a funny name or just a funny discipline.
Oh, I haven't got a funny name. I'm afraid I've just got quite a serious deadpan answer. I think the kind of the tech that we're going to harness next, I think in bio, now that we've really got to grips with harnessing the digital tech, is going to be sort of the process technology. So sort of bioprocessing, whether that be for materials, or processing technologies for automation. All of these things link together, but I think bioprocessing is the next thing, which is why I think this term of TechBio should probably extend to other types of technologies rather than just the digital ones. The hardware, the processes, the sensors, the materials. How can we actually technologies that help us make stuff with biology, I think is going to be the next big thing. So I'm using a phrase that already exists. Maybe we can think of another funky one, but I think
I'll just keep labeling so TechBio process.
Process TechBio, I don't know, but yeah,
Okay.
I think that's going to be instrumental. Whether we're working in clean tech, agri-tech, alternative materials, even alternative ways of making drugs, that kind of process technology, I think is going to be the next big thing after we've got to grips with the data technologies.
Thanks. Belinda, Alice.
Yeah, it's hard to think of a sort of sexy domain area. I mean, there's still scaling. If we're going to be looking at bio-based manufacturing and production, I think you're absolutely right. It's doing that at scale that's then going. So I'm going to take your word and I'm going to put the word big in front of it, because you're going to need to be able to do that at huge scale, which is going to need completely different infrastructure, which we haven't even thought about yet. If we're going to be using ChatGPT instead of Google, which I think people are now starting to do, just to ask, what shall I buy my mum for Christmas? Let's ask ChatGPT. That's going to need huge data centers and enormous infrastructure that we're just not there for. So making things with biology, but big.
Do you mean big in terms of like numbers in parallel, or big in terms of volume?
Both.
Yeah.
Just
Absolutely. I think
big,
we have to include
with a
big numbers as well.
Yeah. Big. It's a big bio.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Like it. Abigail.
An extension of Big Pharma, really, just in every other.
Yeah. Big everything.
Yeah. I really don't have anything to
That's okay. Maybe you could go that would serve your business, the whole in silico preclinical, full stack. No need for animal models. We're only using organoids.
Well, yeah, I mean, that's
Which I
exactly
can't think
where
of
we're going.
succeeding.
Yeah, and yeah, it's. I mean, there's a huge number of smaller sectors that are starting to grow, I guess, aren't they? From the likes of non-animal testing methods.
Alicia, do you have a?
Applied bio is one that me and Chris have been talking about a lot.
Okay.
I think that could be thrown in the mix with Kat and Belinda's. And the one for my team was Ag Disruptors, which we were laughing about at the end of the day yesterday.
Good. I like it. So I'll let you think with other titles for 2025. New topic of tech and bio. And if you could join me thanking the panel, it was a really good discussion. Thank you.